Пане Олеже, я вас сердечно вітаю.
Починаємо, так. Доброго дня, шановні пані і панове. Я хотів би від імені Центру Разумкова привітати всіх, хто сьогодні зголосився на наше запрошення, взяти участь у фаховій дискусії «Українське суспільство, держава і церква в умовах миру і війни. Церковно-релігійна ситуація в Україні 2000-2025». Я перепрошую за деякі організаційні зміни, які не були поза нашою волею. Ми не за круглим столом, але тим не менше, я думаю, це не завадить нашому продуктивному спілкуванню, якості і змістовності нашої сьогоднішньої розмови. Шановні колеги, це особливе видання, це 25-те за ліком і за роками дослідження церковно-релігійної ситуації в Україні, міжконфесійних, державно-конфесійних відносин, здійснена Центром Разумкова за безперервної підтримки представництва фонду Конрада-Аденауера в Україні. Це дуже велике досягнення, це дуже тривале дослідження, яке, я сподіваюся, було і буде корисним і нашим державним органам, і дослідникам, науковцям. І я хотів би подякувати, користуючись цією можливістю, представництву фонду Конрада-Аденауера в Україні, яке сьогодні представляє заступник керівника пан Ян Філіп Вölбern, і сподіватися на те, що наше партнерство в цих дослідженнях, як і в інших, воно триватиме. Ми також дякуємо за підтримку нашої діяльності і за увагу Державній службі етнополітики свободи совісті в Україні Віктору Євгеновичу Єленському, який в різних іпостасях був долучений до цих досліджень з круглого столу з 2000 року, з самих початків. Дякую, Віктору Євгеновичу, за те, що ви сьогодні доєдналися до нас. Сьогодні на цю нашу презентацію ми запросили представників органів влади, науковців, експертів. Багато хто з присутніх брали участь в наших круглих столах, де ми презентували ці дослідження, і знають дуже добре, як воно відбувалося, і динаміку цих процесів. Ну і сьогодні ми хотіли би презентувати результати саме в такому форматі, подивитися на те, які підсумки у нас тенденції за 25 років, і, зокрема, звернути увагу на те, які у нас зміни відбувалися в різних аспектах наших досліджень за період від повномасштабної російської агресії. Хочу нагадати, що ми продовжували ці дослідження у 22-му, 23-му, 24-му, 25-му роках, і маємо якраз матеріал дуже добрий для порівняння і для подальшого аналізу. Отже, шановні колеги, переходимо, власне, до нашого порядку денного. І я хотів би першому надати вступне слово Віктору Єленському, голові Державної служби України з етнополітики і свободи совісті.
Дуже дякую. Я, власне, перш за все, звичайно, хочу подякувати Центру Разумкова і фонду Конрада-Аденауера, які чверть століття вже тому започаткували таке важливе і принципове дослідження, яке зараз є обов'язковим для тих, хто вивчає історію і сьогодення релігії в Україні. Нам навіть важко собі уявити дослідження сучасного стану релігії, релігійних організацій, міжрелігійних відносин в нашій країні без досліджень центру Разумкова. Тому, звичайно, ми зараз мали б згадати тих, хто стояв біля витоків самої ідеї таких регулярних досліджень. Ми маємо згадати покійну пані Людмилу Шангіну, маємо згадати таку чудову дослідницю, як Надя Дудар, Анатолія Рачка, багатьох тих, хто долучився до цього на різних етапах. І, звичайно, хоча Мykhailo мене сварить, я хочу особливо підкреслити його роль в цих дослідженнях. І, попри його невдоволення, нагадати, що він перший в Україні кандидат соціологічних наук. Він просив, вже років 10 просить мене це не робити, каже, що він хотів би здаватися молодшим, але я маю це поза сумнівом зробити. Отже, ці дослідження виявили декілька речей, які також є дуже принциповими для уявлення про не тільки про релігійність в Україні, а взагалі про стан українського суспільства. Перш за все, це те, що релігійність в Україні є, ну сказати б, нормальною, так? Вона є нормальною європейською релігійністю. Україна в піраміді європейських країн є десь посередині, нижче таких країн, як, скажімо, Мальта, Ірландія, Польща, Румунія, але її населення демонструє набагато більш послідовну поведінку, ніж населення скандинавських країн, балтійських країн і східної Німеччини. Далі ці дослідження показують нам, що українці надзвичайно високо цінують роль церкви, довіряють церкві і довіряють їй останнім часом набагато більш усвідомлено, ніж це було на початках століття. Були і є випадки, коли інші інститути випереджають церкву в рівні довіри. Це ми бачили під час Помаранчевої революції, коли президенту довіряли більше, ніж церкві. Це ми бачимо під час війни, коли Збройним силам України довіряють більше, ніж церкві, коли волонтери отримують більший рівень довіри. Але церква постійно і регулярно отримує свій відсоток довіри, і це вже не та довіра, яка була на початку 90-х, коли не було кому довіряти, коли церква була тією інституцією, яка не сприймалась пов'язаною з попереднім режимом, і вважалося, що вона здатна розв'язати ті проблеми, які були не до снаги радянському режимові. Ми бачимо, що рівень довіри церкві і рівень декларації релігійності, він зростає в найбільш гострі такі періоди нашої історії. Ну, на початку російського вторгнення були такі очевидні ознаки загостреності релігійних почуттів. Потім ця тенденція дещо спадає, і це також також нормально. Але, звичайно, що я не маю і наміру, і не маю такої місії переповідати дослідження, яке є надзвичайно цікавим і яке є поживою для роздумів для цілих поколінь наших і релігієзнавців, і соціологів, і тих, хто аналізує життя українського суспільства. Тому я ще раз хочу подякувати і фонду Аденаура, Конрада-Аденаура, і центру Разумкова за ту роботу, яку вони роблять. І хочу ще раз закликати наших вчених до вдумливого, і такого. Тому я ще раз хочу оперативний аналіз, тільки співставлення того, що виявляли дослідження на початку століття, те, що вони виявляли в процесі цих 25 років, тільки тоді ми можемо дійти до якихось певних і верифікованих висновків. Дуже дякую і закликаю вас сьогодні до такої плідної дискусії.
Дякую, пане Вікторе, дякую за добрі слова. І я хочу запросити до слова пана Яна Філіпа Вölберна, заступника керівника представництва фонду Конрада-Аденауера в Україні.
Дякую. Шановний пане Єленський, шановний пане Yakymenko, шановні учасники та учасниці, дякую вам за ваш інтерес та участь у нашому заході. Ми проводимо дослідження в галузі релігії спільно з центром Разумкова вже 25 років і чверть століття. Це дозволяє нам спостерігати за довгостроковими тенденціями. Нещодавно один мій знайомий сказав мені, що вважає ці дослідження дуже корисними для своєї роботи. Я з радістю передаю, що похвалю нашим партнерам. Як заступник керівника Українського бюро КАС, я живу в Україні з літа 2023 року. Крім того, я є християном, протестантом і членом Евангелічної церкви Святої Катерини у Києві. У дослідженні я знайшов багато речей, які я також відчуваю у повсякденному житті моєї церкви. По-перше, це гарні стосунки між християнськими конфесіями. Наприклад, минулого року на запрошення отця Лопатинського я прочитав лекцію в Мykhailівському монастирі на тему «Християнська демократія». Трохи пізніше група семінаристів відвідала Євангелічну церкву Святої Катерини і мала цікаву розмову з пастором Маном про питання віри. Влітку цього року ми хочемо супроводжувати групу представників Ради церков і релігійних громад до Брюсселя і Берліна. Я дуже цьому радію. На цьому та інших прикладах я бачу, що соціальна місія церков стала ще важливішою. Церкви захищають бідних і нужденних, але також підтримують солдатів на фронті. Вони захищають Україну і Європи. Також у повсякденному житті і за даним дослідженням можна побачити, що християнами різних конфесій все більше сприймають себе як українських християн, не забуваючи при цьому, що церква як тіло Христове, звичайно, завжди є наднаціонального. Я маю на увазі, українці більше не приймають втручання ззовні у свої релігійні справи. Це хороший розвиток події. Я сподівався, що церкві також відіграватимуть позитивну роль у майбутньому відновленні країни. Чи то у ціленні ран суспільства, чи то у збереженні внутрішнього миру між групами населення після закінчення бойових дій, чи то у передачі віру наступним поколінням. Ще раз дякую за співпрацю і передаю слово пану Yakymenko. Дякую.
Дякую, пане Вölberну. Шановні колеги, перед тим, як перейти власне до презентації дослідження, кілька буквально організаційних повідомлень. Ми працюємо з вами і офлайн, і онлайн. У нас є учасники онлайн, які долучаться до нашої дискусії. Робоча мова заходу українська, забезпечується синхронний переклад англійською мовою для тих, хто потребує і в залі, і онлайн. Матеріали проєкту дослідження українською і англійською мовою доступні в відкритому доступі на сайті Центру Разумкова. Друковане видання, будь ласка, прошу долучатися, мати цю можливість в себе його мати, будь ласка, воно є. І зазвичай наше дослідження буде після цього направлено до всіх учасників, членів Всеукраїнської ради церков і релігійних організацій, а також, як традиційно, до бібліотек органів влади, до університетів, до наукових установ. Тому це, що називається, ми зацікавлені в тому, щоб воно якомога ширше було використане. Власне, для чого воно і робилося. Шановні колеги, зараз я запрошую до слова Мykhailo Мishchenka, заступника директора соціологічної служби Центру Разумкова, для презентації. Прохання пане Мykhailo, до 15 хвилин, з тим, щоб ми мали можливість
Скажімо, число вірних Української православної церкви Московського патріархату зростало з 2000 до 2010 року. У 2000 році їх було 9%, і максимальна кількість тих, хто відносили себе до УПЦ Московського патріархату, було в 2000 році, це 24%. Але після 2000 року число тих, хто відносить себе до УПЦ Московського патріархату, постійно зменшувалося. Це до 20% у 2013, 12% у 2018 і 13% у 2021 році. Ну і, як відомо, в 2018 році УПЦ Київського патріархату і Автокефальна православна церква об'єдналися в єдину церкву. Спочатку спостерігалося після об'єднання церков деяке і внаслідок заяв колишнього патріарха Філарета, що він не визнає це об'єднання, відбулася певна дезорієнтація православних віруючих, і внаслідок цього у 2020 році частка тих, хто відносить себе до ПЦУ, була меншою навіть, ніж частка тих, хто відносили себе до УПЦ Київського патріархату. Однак потім намітилася тенденція все-таки збільшення частки тих, хто відносить себе до ПЦУ. У 2021 році вона зросла до 24%, у 2022 до 36%, і зараз вона становить 42% серед усіх опитаних. Після початку повномасштабної війни Росії проти України істотно менше стало тих, хто себе відносить до вірних Української православної Московського патріархату. Їх було у 2021 році 13%, а зараз їх частка серед громадян України становить лише 5%. Протягом останніх років істотно зменшилася частка тих, хто відносить себе просто православних, тобто не відносить себе до конкретної православної церкви. Якщо в 2000 році таких було 39%, то за даними останнього опитування таких лише 10%. Також цікавий є регіональний розподіл, що за даними наших опитувань, найбільша частка вірних УПЦ Московського патріархату у західному регіоні. Хоча часто стереотипом є, що найбільша їхня частка у південно-східному регіоні, це не так. Але особливо висока їх частка у західному регіоні, у тих областях західного регіону, які знаходяться поза межами Галичини. Якщо в Галичині жоден із респондентів не відніс себе до УПЦ Московського патріархату, то в негалицьких областях Західної України 21%. Для порівняння у центральному і східному регіоні до цієї церкви віднесли себе 4%, у південному 3% опитаних. Стосовно віднесення себе до членів певної релігійної громади чи парафії, ну, це важливо, тому що є різниця між декларованою належністю до церкви і належністю себе до певної релігійної громади. І за даними останнього опитування, лише 29% віднесли себе до певної релігійної громади, хоча це істотно більше, ніж у 2020 році, тоді лише 16% віднесли себе до членів певної релігійної громади. Члени релігійних громад, які віднесли себе до Православної церкви України, становлять 14,5% серед усіх опитаних, члени греко-католицьких громад 7%, а членами громад УПЦ Московського патріархату назвали себе 2,5%, членами протестантських громад 2%, і членами римокатолицьких громад 0,6%. Стосовно ситуації з відвідуваннями релігійних служб, то ситуація змінилася незначною мірою. Якщо в 2000 році відвідували релігійні служби 49% опитаних, то у 2025 році 53% опитаних. На запитання, чи відвідували ви богослужіння минулої неділі, суботи, п'ятниці, то 24% дали позитивну відповідь. Це не дуже істотно відрізняється від рівня 2019 року, коли ми вперше поставили це запитання. Тоді було таких 21%. Стосовно зміни відвіданості церкви після війни, відповідаючи на це запитання, 47% відповіли, що відвідують церкву, як і раніше, 14% стали відвідувати частіше, а 12% відповіли, що відвідують церкву рідше, ніж до початку повномасштабної війни. Оцінюючи роль релігії у житті суспільства, більшість громадян відзначають позитивну роль релігії. Так, 75% респондентів відзначають, що релігія підвищує моральність і духовність людей. 68% що релігія є одним із важливих засобів відродження національної свідомості і культури. 55% вважають, що релігія є одним із чинників демократичного суспільства. Лише незначна частка опитаних відзначає негативний вплив релігії на життя суспільства. Стосовно довіри до церкви, то церкві довіряє більшість громадян України. Разом з тим, порівняно з 2010 роком, коли рівень суспільної довіри досяг максимуму, тоді було 72,5% довіряли церкві. Наразі цей показник є нижчим. Довіряють церкві 60% опитаних. Ми традиційно ставимо запитання стосовно моральності священнослужителів. Лише 29% респондентів висловлюють з певністю тому, що більшість священнослужителів є глибоко моральними і духовними особами. Увесь період моніторингу переважає думка, що священнослужителі – це такі ж, як і більшість із нас, з усіма достоинствами і гріхами. За даними останнього опитування, так вважають 44%, і 20% вважають, що більшість священнослужителів думають передусім про гроші, а не про духовне. Стосовно ролі церкви у суспільному житті, оцінка ролі церкви, вона в цілому залишається позитивною, хоча й відзначається певна динаміка, скажімо, дуже істотно вищою була оцінка позитивної ролі церкви після початку повномасштабної війни. У 2022 році 59% вказували на позитивну роль церкви. Хоча цей показник є зараз дещо нижчим, 54%, але, як бачимо, все-таки більшість опитаних відзначають позитивну роль церкви в українському суспільстві. Стосовно того, якою повинна бути роль соціального служіння у діяльності церкви, то 30% опитаних відповіли, що соціальне служіння повинно відігравати.
And attitude toward these problems seizes stopping the activities of churches who have ties with the aggressor state. You will find it in the study materials. And now let's proceed with the general discussion. Thank you. Now I see the list of participants joining us online on my screen. When you registered, we kindly ask you to basically announce your speeches. I will kindly ask colleagues to keep with 5 minutes of time. And since we have professional discussion, I will start it with inviting our experts, specifically Ms. Ludmila Filipovich. And I will kindly ask you to open this discussion. And our next presenter, well, we have members of parliament joining us online and offline, so I will kindly ask Ms. Solomia Bobrovska joining us today and intending to participate in the discussion. And then Mr. Gishdanov, please. Microphone, please. This 25 years for us, for researchers and for experts, have been pretty intense. But we were looking forward for the results of the survey because this is sociological evidence we can rely on in order to properly assess the religious situation in Ukraine, including interconfessional relationships, specifically relationships between the church and the state. So we are sincerely grateful for Konrad-Adenauer Foundation for making the right choice when opting for Razumkov Center as the implementing partner for this study, because I believe that the results have clearly demonstrated that it was really a good idea. So I'm also sincerely grateful for everyone, for all employees and staff members of Razumkov Center for very insightful research of the religious situation in Ukraine. It's especially interesting in view of the scandal on balance between religious freedom and national security, which is currently ongoing in the bar community and abroad. So probably when I'm reading this research, I will specifically focus on data who supports the idea that in Ukraine there is no religious discrimination or prosecution. I will kindly ask Mr. Yuriy to include in a list of those with whom you plan to share the findings of this research, Mr. Amsterdam-Co, who is really looking for troubles here in Ukraine, claiming that Christianity is almost over and Christian churches will soon be prohibited. And we definitely need to pay more attention to these foreign structures and share English language version of your research, because they won't come here themselves, but there's a huge need for it. So then, in addition to pure research center, we also add our results to the mix. Well, for many experts, unfortunately, these findings are a bit less known than for us. If you don't mind, I can help you with preparing a list of organizations who would need these results, because at our academic platforms, various forums and venues, we always refer to the results of this research, and this is a very strong argument you cannot get away from, something you cannot ignore. So we definitely need to keep it in mind. Religion, religious freedom, freedom of consciousness versus national security. And I would strongly encourage you in the next to specifically highlight on the interactions between these two concepts, these two essential factors to our current Ukrainian life. In the next iteration of your research, you need to think how to properly formulate this question, but we really need to come up with arguments, qualitative and quantitative data, to show that Ukraine may initiate changes of international standards that disregard the significance of national security, and specifically in the context of restricting religious freedom. It's something I personally find especially interesting, and something which is unfortunately missing in this iteration. But I really believe that these consolidated materials we'll have received will really demonstrate that Ukraine keeps true to the guarantees of freedom of conscience and religious freedom enshrined in our constitution back in the 1990s. Thank you, Mr. Dmila. It's indeed a very relevant topic today because, following our previous research, after our previous research was published, there was outrage in the foreign press, specifically in Germany, on so-called attacks against the freedom of conscience and freedom of expression in Ukraine. So we will really appreciate your support with a list of potential recipients. And now we'll kindly invite Ms. Solomia Bobromska, Member of Parliament of Ukraine, who actually represents the Committee on National Security. Hello, everyone. I see here my colleagues from a Culture Committee, and I think it would be good for them to speak here as well. But thank you so much for this data. We really need to sit with it. We need to review it. Mr. Mykhailo stopped his presentation at the most interesting topic, prohibition of activities, religious organizations that are present in Ukraine and may be a part of foreign structures. I represent the region that is not a part of so-called Halicia regions, so Volyn, and we have the same problem here. We actually observe proliferation of communities and who file lawsuit regarding the prohibition of activity of Koretsky female monastery. It's probably the only institution in Ukraine which is fully subordinated to the Russian Church. Actually, I'm very emotional about it. I'm very emotional about national security because when I look through these responses and 50% of people claim that the reasons behind these conflicts, interconfessional conflicts, are political. Well, it's not political. It's a national security because they're building the agent network for enemy we're fighting it. I also pay attention to some eastern regions. Eastern regions are once again falling behind. Southern regions are falling behind in their attitude towards the prohibition of of individual religious organizations in churches. But at least I see that that the East is now finally aligned with the West. Actually, in Bessarabia, part of this region, we have two Ukrainian Orthodox Church parishes, and we have several Protestant confessions, and unfortunately, it's dominated by Russian Orthodox Church. So that's it from me. I just appreciate this huge pile of information for me to process, because I would definitely the governmental authorities, specifically the Security Service of Ukraine, definitely need to take a look at and draw certain conclusions and plan further actions. Thank you so much, Ms. Solovia. Razumkov Center is open for cooperation with the committee and other governmental actors who are responsible for freedom of consciousness, both freedom of consciousness and national security. This is what we're talking about, and we hope that this research is going to be useful for you. Dear colleagues, now I would like to kindly give floor to Mr. Zhdanov, one of the founder of Razumkov Center and the person who took part in each and every iteration of this study, in each and every round table. Then I will kindly ask Mr. Pavlenko, Member of Parliament of Ukraine, to get prepared. Hello, everyone. Since it's our 25th anniversary study, let me start with a little bit of history. To be accurate, this was a mere idea of round table, permanent standing round table, emerged back before 2000 year with the support of Mr. Alexander. I remember how we discussed it with late Ms. Shengina. We discussed this idea, and this idea emerged as a response to challenging interconfessional situation which existed back then, as engaging the tools of civil society in order to build dialogue between churches and between confessions. Back then we partially succeeded, and by the way, I wrote your welcoming remarks. You're absolutely correct, Mr. Viktor. Razumkov Center not just took a snapshot of the situation, but also suggested certain solutions. So as a founder of Razumkov Center, I have a proposal to our president, Mr. Yuriy. Maybe it's time for us to get back to the format where we invite religious figures representing members of clergy, representing different churches, not just experts and not just civil servants. We definitely need to consider it. So it has been a really long journey of awareness. The church factor, the confession factor, affects not just affects the internal political situation. It may contribute, not just can contribute to stabilization or destabilization of internal political arena. We observed it in 2014. Then we received Tomos, then the full-scale invasion started, and then we finally realized that inter-church and church situation is an important factor of national security, which has very direct impact on the national security and defense capacity of our country. Currently, we observe this tension in the Orthodox community. And it's not focused on some dogmatic rules or specific aspects to the church rights. It's very simple. One church talks about and preaches the defense of Ukraine and sends chaplains to the armed forces, while another church, well, at least a part of it, simply promotes the ideas of Russian border and, well, you know the rest. We know that it's managed and directed from Moscow. So I have one suggestion here. I think I absolutely agree with you and Mr. Viktor Yelensky, dear members of the committee. Experts are willing to support you and advocate in support of your activities. Well, it's a well-known case where delegations go to American Congress to complain about religious persecution. Probably we need to form expert groups, delegations of members of clergy who will actually tell the truth that there is no prosecution and no restrictions on the freedom of conscience in Ukraine. Yes, absolutely. And I'm just about to wrap up. My second point, I have a question to Mr. Viktor. Maybe, if possible, you could share some relevant information about this court action, about this lawsuit involving the church subordinated to the aggressor state. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Igor. Am I supposed to answer now or later? It's up to you. You're the moderator. I've asked my question. So it's up for you to decide. You may answer it now, you may answer it later, but we really would like to learn a little bit more about it. Okay. As you know, there is a lawsuit filed by a Kiev office of Ukrainian Orthodox Church in terms of Koretsky Monastery. It's directly covered by law. It's a part of Russian Orthodox Church directly, while the Kiev office, it refused to follow the order of the State Service of Ethnical Policy and Freedom of Conscience. The only requirement was to officially leave the structure of the Russian Orthodox Church. So briefly, the court has not yet started the hearing of this lawsuit on the merits. The defense attorneys engage in very proactive stance. They abuse their procedural rights and create delays, because when the hearing starts, they probably won't be able to explain why this Kiev office is spending so much money and so much effort, pays so much to the foreign lawyers, and well, foreign lawyers, it's directly, this information is directly available on lobbying websites, so they won't be able to explain why they spend so much efforts and resources to stay within the structure of Moscow Patriarchy. The last court session was scheduled on February 24th, and the attorneys once again protracted the time and adjourned the court hearing. It's just a brief status update, but well, clearly, judiciary is an independent branch of power, and we are not in a good position to assess the judgments. But I feel like the court is running out of patience, because These steps taken by the attorneys of Kiev Metropolis is a typical abuse of justice, typical abuse of procedure. For example, just 1 second. An attorney, a defense counsel, 1 to 5, comes to the court and says, here's a monastery X wants to join the court case, want to join the lawsuit as a third party. So there is a motion. I'm attorney. I'm filing this motion. Please review it. The court accepts the motion, and then the counsel immediately files another motion. Please adjourn the court hearing because I need to review this particular motion I just filed. The judge says it doesn't make sense. You wrote it yourself. Yes, and now I need to read it again. And there are many cases like this.
Ну все, я
For instance, yeah, I'll stop giving examples because we have things to discuss here. But there are many, many examples like this, and we'll be talking about it evidently during our expert council meeting. Thank you. This is indeed very interesting information, and the details that are useful for all the participants of discussion. But to continue the discussion of our today's presentation, I'd like to invite Rostislav Pavlenko, the People's Deputy of Ukraine, and Viktor Vojnilovich and Alexander Sagan. Please prepare. Thank you, Yuriy, dear everyone. Very happy to be able to take part in this discussion. Unfortunately, certain political issues prevented me from being with you physically. But anyway, I'm here online. I'd like to thank the Razumkov Center for their very professional work. It is the opening of the season. These round tables, they take place in spring every year. And I'd also like to thank Konrad-Adenauer Foundation for supporting this useful initiative. It's great that Viktor Yelensky commented on the situation because I wanted to talk about very practical things. And the behavior of the Moscow church basically is very predictable because it indeed will be very difficult for them to win on essence. We have worked very hard on our position. So this is why they are just dragging time here. And we hear very often that we need to act jointly. We have a positive example in the parliament. It's the interfaction, not officially, but interfaction group that's very effective where we coordinate effort. But there should have been more coordination like this because unfortunately we see that the Moscow church manages to bit by bit push its position. We even observed it in the research. They say that, okay, our believers are for the European Union. Our believers are against the Russian aggression. You know, we don't even praise Cyril and, you know, not all of us, maybe just on Sundays. But, you know, jokes aside, we observe in the West, too, the increase of this opinion that, you know, why are you doing this? Set the political issues aside. One of the colleagues said rightfully that even the questionnaires show it. It's not the church issue, it's a political issue. It's not even the issue of national security, as the colleagues rightfully said, too. It is a question of very clear cooperation on communicating clear things. The Parliament, Assembly of the Council of Europe, of the OSCE, the number of leaders of churches and religious organizations very clearly show that the Moscow Church is not as much a religious organization as a part of the Moscow aggression mechanism. And in this circle, of course, it's quite evident, but trust me, it's far less evident to the broader public. And to cooperate on communicating this, on bringing the discussion from talking about inter-church relations, as Ihor said, or, you know, difference in canonical things. It's very important to discuss this in terms of, not intervention of the state in the life of any church. Of course, it would be good if the Ukrainian Orthodox believers came together, but now there's a challenge to the national security on Moscow Patriarchate Church being together with the Moscow Center. And it's very clear what this connection is. And I'd like to end with saying that with the help of the colleagues, with the help of parliament diplomacy and the representatives of churches and religious organizations and the expert community, be more active in the international community, promote this in the mass media. We need to clearly differentiate the interconfessional peace that is characteristic for Ukraine and the use of specific church organizations by the Moscow aggressor to push its policies. And the goal is to break this connection. It is evident to us, but it requires communication to the public. Thank you, Rostislav, for absolutely grounded thoughts. And I think that the expert community is ready to join this work that you're talking about. And I'd like to ask Viktor Venilovich, the first deputy of the State Service of Ethnic Policies and Freedom of Conscience of Ukraine. He's online with us today. Good afternoon, dear colleagues, participants of the Round Table and organizer. Thank you for inviting me to participate and the possibility to share some of my thoughts. And first of all, I probably like to say something that's a little bit emotional, but like to call this 25 years a difficult, complicated, but a marathon with rather good results that became possible thanks to close cooperation of Razumkov Center and the partners from the Ukrainian office of Konrad-Adenauer Foundation. And this cooperation is quite fruitful and creates the empirical basis that is now open to the experts, to the broader circle of researchers, and to everyone who is interested in this sphere and in what's going on in the religious sphere. So despite all the difficulties, of the wartime, this became possible. And I was always wary of January each year when traditionally the results of the new research are published. And sometimes when it's delayed, it always makes me anxious. I'm anxious whether, this year's research is published, whether we have the possibility. But thank God, thanks to your cooperation and this, in a good sense, pressure from the expert community who is awaiting the results, it became possible this year as well. And we hope that in the future we'll also be able to make good use of the results. That's first. Second, dear colleagues, traditionally in the presentation and receiving the results, we always mention this factor and characteristic of our religious space environment as the high level of belief of faithfulness in the Ukrainian society. But in my opinion, we probably don't pay enough attention to the structure of this religious belief. So the forms, the representations, the manifestations of this religious belief directly in religious life. And basically, every time all the sociological results, they do have its stable dynamics, but we notice when this high level of faithfulness is declared, we notice this ambivalent reflection and feedback from the Ukrainian society. And what I mean by this is that next to declaring the high level of faithfulness, we can say that there is a rather low level of identification with a specific direction. Also, low level of association with a specific religious community or organization. We also document these things in the results of the research that religious identity, it is in many senses secondary to the national identity, to the civil identity, regional identity, and it is reflected by the results of the sociological research that we are discussing about now. And I think it's maybe worth paying attention to the rather low, as for me, and maybe even critically low level of the opinion of respondents about the moral authority of the priests, of the clergy, and the depth of their spiritual mission. And I think that these things, they shouldn't make us worry too much when talked about separately. But if we think about faithfulness as an important component, as a part of the religious complex, and a basic factor that should become the foundation for the institutional structure of this complex, identifying the forms of working with believers, that's one thing. And also, if you look at this in general, this religious complex and church, generalizing this notion as this image as an important societal institution, and the institution that is called in a certain way to promote consolidation, solidarization of the Ukrainian society, especially in the times of the war. So if you look at it this way, I do apologize, but you're about to run out of time. Yes, thank you. So faithfulness is the extent to which it is important has the consolidating, solidarizing potential for Ukraine. So I do support the suggestion. We also did discuss it with Viktor yesterday. Ihor Zhdanov, I understand certain complications to build this discussion in this case, but wouldn't it makes sense to invite at least the members of religious centers to the presentation, to involve them in discussing these things, because there must be many questions here on the operation, on the activities of the religious organizations themselves. That's just some general musings on what we're discussing today. I'm very grateful to everyone for the invitation. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Thank you. Thank you, Viktor. Dear colleagues, before we finish the discussion, we'll come back to talking about future formats and inviting the representatives of the churches, because it's indeed a serious issue to discuss. We need to think about it thoroughly. And I ask Alexander Sahan to the floor, and I'll ask Serhiy to prepare. Thank you. First of all, as everybody else, I'd like to thank both the Razumkov Center and the Konrad-Adenauer Foundation Office in Ukraine for many years of support and systematic work in evaluation of the processes that take place in the Ukrainian society, in freedom of conscience, in its broadest understanding. And this research is essential to the academia, to the researchers, so that they have convincing arguments to support their conclusions, and also to understand or confirm the cause and effect relations between the processes that we are studying. These research results are also useful to the churches, and we already talked that the churches should pay attention to their human resources, because only 29% of the respondents think that the clergy are example of morality and spirituality. And also the churches can also receive some information about their social service and directions of social service that the society expects from them. Or, for instance, the issue of digitalization of the churches, it is also a very interesting question. And the fact that 17% of respondents today take part in services online, it's also a very interesting number. And 29% of the respondents support digitalization of the churches. This kind of research is also important for the society in general in the times of media killing, when some of the mass media, the new direction, the bloggers, to try to form public opinion. And it was very interesting to read how the law of 2024 is supported in the society on protecting the constitutional order. And the share of people who support this is rather convincing, so only 5% is against supporting this law. And here I was interested in these numbers in terms of how this law is tolerated by believers of Moscow Patriarchy churches, and there's 39% of them who support the statement that the religious organization in Ukraine cannot have the main office in the country that is an aggressor towards Ukraine. And 44% also think that the organization active in Ukraine cannot be part of this structure of the organization that is prohibited in Ukraine. So even the minimal informational awareness raising work that's done by the state and by the media, it does have a certain result. So we're talking about the activities of Moscow Patriarchy to the extent that even the believers who attend the churches of the Moscow Patriarchy, we can feel the change in their perception of what's going on in Ukraine. And these numbers also explain this high share of respondents who say 63% who say that there is full freedom of conscience and equality of religion before the law. Also, a couple of numbers on the Moscow Patriarchy and the attitude to Ukrainian Orthodox Church. 35% are positive, 41% don't care, and only 70% have negative attitudes. And it's despite the effort of most of the clergy to make Ukrainian Orthodox Church into this national political monster for their believers. So I think that this is the potential that in strategic perspective, Moscow Patriarchy can rely on in Ukraine. That's 17%, and it correlates very much with our studies of the Department of Religious Studies. We're talking about 17% that the Moscow Patriarchy can rely on in Ukraine after most of the church understands where they are. On the other hand, these numbers explain this. I do apologize the time. Yes, so the discrepancy in self-edification, that people, 5%. And we support the idea, Yuriy, that you mentioned, that this objective information does form a partnership relations between the state and the church. Religious scientists, since the beginning of forming of the concept of relations between the state and the church, have supported this idea about forming a relation of partnership. The other problem is how to formulate it correctly and introduce it in the legislation. That's one thing. And another thing, we were a little bit surprised by this high percentage, 30% of the respondents support the idea of the state church. It's it's been cultivated even in Verkhovna Rada, by the way. There were several attempts to submit a draft law, if not about the state church, but about the churches with special status. We, religious scientists, explaining that the Ministry of Education and Science has basically destroyed the education in religious studies, and it cannot but have consequences, but that's another topic. Thank you for this research, and thank you for your attention. Thank you very much. I'd like to please ask Serhiy join the discussion. Dear colleagues, I'd like to warn that after Serhiy speaks, we have just about 6 minutes before we need to end this discussion. So if you still want to speak, please prepare brief statements, 2-3 minutes. We can invite 2 or 3 more people.
It's my pleasure, Mr. President and dear colleagues. I'm happy to welcome you for well-known reason, but I'm also a permanent participant of your roundtable for over 25 years, and hopefully we will prevail over our enemy. As for the matter of the case, I will just briefly tell you a few things. We all know that the largest threat for our country and our nation is a religious organization, the name of which is the Moscow Patriarchy, also called Ukrainian Orthodox Church. As you know, it's the National Institute of Strategic Studies. With colleagues from other institutions, we were constantly writing about it. I am happy to hear Mr. Pavlenko, Mr. Rostislav Pavlenko, who have been a director. We have closely collaborated when the Ukraine win Thomas. Well, I need to highlight some things, and if you want to learn more, actually recently we have published this official brochure, Social and Religious Relations. Amidst the war of Russia against Ukraine, the strategic, it's available in paper format, just a small print, but it's available on the website because it's an analytical report. It's available at the website of the Institute. And the second book, we have amazing we have Mr. Agresko, Minister of Foreign, who invited me to participate in the monography, Multidimensional Racism, Beginning and the End. And here we have a chapter, Role of Religion in Development of Racism, and it specifically focuses on the issues researched by this center and which have broader resonance. Let me just read for you. We believe, when we were developing these materials, we believe that it's not supposed that this discreditation of Ukrainian authorities for religious communities is supposed to leave a mark, because we know that there are a lot of religious organizations. It's not about pressure against religious freedom. It's about national security, especially during the war, during the open war. So this war has been ongoing for 13 years. So here I have some statements and some suggestions. I'm not going to read them because it takes a long time, but just let me list some of the institutions we have questions for and the actions we expect. There is specific suggestion to the Council of the National Security and Defense, Security Service of Ukraine, Office of the Prosecutor General, State Bureau of Investigations, National Police, Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine, to take some actions, some legislative initiatives. We have suggestions for the Ministry of Education, bring back religious studies as a discipline, State Service of the Ethnic Policy and Freedom of Confession, Ministry of Justice, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and particularly the local authorities. And I will just briefly explain you why. Because if they worked properly, we would not deal with it. What's going on right now, that we hear monthly, daily new churches open, Moscow Patriarchy does the crosswalks, with very provocative actions, etc. And also, dear colleagues, let me remind you that during these days, we are about to have the very sad anniversary, 80 years of so-called Lviv church congregation where the security service used to eliminate Catholics in Ukraine. This is the reason why we're coming here together, and we do this review just to make sure that the Russian patriarchy won't do it again, won't be able to impact the Ukrainian nation. And let me just mention the newest things of how they work under the network of the religious organizations. Just remember the Euromaidan's revolution of dignity. They travel to Lavra, then to Crimea, and then we see this person capturing Crimean parliament in April 2014. Slovensk and Donetsk, thank you for your attention, and I hope that we will continue to our work for many years to come. I will then proceed with the handover to the President. Thank you so much for your very consistent position. Dear colleagues, do we have someone else to speak? 2 final minutes. Just please introduce yourself. Mr. Chernomorets, I just want to express my gratitude and appreciation. I remember this 9 10 tables in 1998. Konrad-Adenauer Foundations conducted them, and back then this idea was born that we do need this research. And secondly, back in 2000, when this first book was released, a pretty sick book, we didn't have enough copies. Everyone was using it, and it has a real impact. And interestingly, it's impacted not just the development of analytical work within governmental structures, because I remember these analytical letters in 1990s. I was reading them, and I remember how they changed when this first research was released. Now, people had the backbone, people could rely on data, on evidence, interpret them, consider future perspectives. And I also remember how much better and how much the analytical work improved at religious organizations. It's also a great benefit, and I think it had strong impact on Ukraine. And it's one of the reasons why today we're not Russia, we're not Belarus, that we live where we live. Because here we have researchers, civil society, governmental actors. They have changed their perspective on the situations. And first of all, the Ukrainian churches don't just need to grow in number, but they also need proper leadership. We have seen different stages. This leadership has been implemented in different ways. But so yes, the churches could have done more. I really appreciate, but it's a huge work which hasn't been done by other nations. But this is the reason why Razumkov and Konrad-Adenauer Foundation was pushing them forward, asking for leadership. Then partnership relationships. We are separated, we are independent, we have freedom, let us foster freedom. And then we're working towards partnership, but how this partnership is going to look like? Representatives of churches said that we need partnership like in Belarus, and then we need to satisfy it all like in Russia. So, and all studies showed that people are wanting it. And you're also supposed to treat it differently. So today we continue this discussion, but thanks to all the studies, we're doing it at a very different level. We need to develop Field studies, we need to take data from different communities, religious Lviv, religious Kiev. Thank you, thank you, thank you. It would be, we have a backbone and we need these next steps. We have been missing for many years. So I think Mr. Razumkov Center and Konrad-Adenauer Foundation need to think about it and support it, because we don't yet know all our religious country, religious landscape. And the more we explore it, the more we get surprised. Especially now there is a war in the country, so we suddenly discover how huge potential we have with the volunteering movement, with chaplain movement. And if we had more field researchers, we would see this potential in advance, and we would know how to guide it. Thank you so much, and I hope that next years will be even more fruitful. You have just 1 minute. Roman Kucharuk, Ukrainian club. I just wanted to I want to announce that 2026 is announced to be a year of Yakymenko. And the question to Mr. Yelensky, when we're about to bring back Pochayev and Ukrainian Pochayev, when it's going to happen in a year, in 2 years, in 100 years. I will let you know personally the week before I turn. We will reach this point. Thank you, Mr. Viktor. Dear colleagues, we need to wrap up with a round table. Mr. Philipp, Mr. Viktor, do you have to say some closing remarks to our audience, or is it? Or we're about to finish? We have raised many very important and essential topics, both research topics, research and practical topics, and scientific topics. Unfortunately, we won't be able to discuss all of them right now, so maybe we need to bring back our our members of clergy, like what happens before the full-scale invasion. Maybe it would make sense to discuss, to focus on it next year. Well, I have to once again get back to year 2000 and to one of the researchers who developed the very fourth questionnaire, Nadia Dudar, who said, well, we don't have believers. I applied parameters, and it seems like we don't have religious people in Ukraine. The thing is, well, there are people, believers, who are described in the book, and there are people who live among us. And people who would be in line with all these definitions, they don't exist even at embassies. And, well, this religiousness we deal with is exactly this true fate. And as for implementation of the law and protection of constitutional order in the field of activity of religious organizations, it's in force. And it's enforced consistently. And I don't perceive this criticism when it says it happens slowly. We are dismantling the structure of Moscow Patriarchy that A is efficient, happens in the framework of Ukrainian legislation won't put the burden on the conscience of ordinary believers, ordinary people who are truly loyal to Ukraine, who send their parents and children to the front line. We are not fighting against them. We're fighting a religious organization who intends to destroy Ukrainian culture and Ukrainian identity and moving towards it. Here we will show no mercy.
So I would like to say thanks again to Razumkov Center, to Pane Yelensky for attending this presentation. I have good news. We will continue working together and planning to do the next study together. Maybe some changes, because I think as time changes, we can also maybe look at few further new aspects. Let's see what is in the pipeline. To sum up, I know now everyone is talking about that big question of how is the relation between the churches, in particular with the Ukrainian Orthodox Church of the Moscow Patriarchy. But I think what I, from my German perspective, I think is the most important point is that Christianity in this country is deeply rooted. And I very much wish Ukraine and all of you who you say you're believers, either if you are attending services or not, I think that's a very good basis for building an independent state. I'm saying this from my German perspective as a Christian Democrat, because there's once been a judge in Germany who was very popular, and he said the state relies on things he cannot create himself. And I very much believe that he was very right. If you want to build an independent, strong state, there are some things you have to rely on. And I think Christian belief is a very good basis for that. So thank you from our side for coming. Stay with us and let's look into the future, into the next research. Thank you.
Дякую, пане Яне Філіп.
Thank you, Mr. Jan Philipp. So, thank you for your support for Ukrainian nation, for your intention to continue our research in this field. We are ready to introduce changes, modifications, and amendments, but most importantly for this process to continue, because our discussion indicates that it's one of the greatest achievements we have achieved over this year. I mean, this long-term nature and continuity of this research. And I hope that we will have a good future both in this area and in all other areas. Dear colleagues, I am grateful to everyone for proactive participation in this discussion. I'm grateful to our participants online, grateful to interpreters for enabling communication with our international experts and participants. So finally, that's it from me. Thank you so much. Best regards. And our discussion is over.